Good day, beautiful people. Bev Perez here, and on another episode of Just What the Are You Talking About, Bev? So, this episode was initially to be about grief, and it ended up being more of an interview on my journey of grief and overcoming trauma. Debated on putting it out there, but I do think that it's just important to share my background and what I've been through. There's so much power in storytelling. Really hope you guys resonate with some of what I'm going to say in this interview. It is a long one. So there's a part two to this part one. So I also want to give a shout out to my homegirl Leslie. She's a coach and therapist on nutrition, wellness, and relationships. Took the time out to really do this with me. You guys can find her on Instagram at the.loom.life. Also theloomlife.com. And she also has her podcast, Pulling Threads, on YouTube. Anywho, hope you guys enjoy. Thank you again, Leslie, and thank you guys for watching. Comment, like, share, all the things. Thank you guys. You. Come from a law enforcement background. I want you guys to see me like this, all the time, and I feel like this. All right. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about grief, all the things we kind of don't know, might need to know, are still trying to figure out. I realize that we're just a lot kind of grief illiterate. And so, which is okay. We just don't know what to say sometimes. So that's why me and Leslie are here to help you all today. One of the reasons why I thought this was so fitting for me on a personal journey is because I'm going to be experiencing the 9th year anniversary of the loss of my beloved. And, if somebody would have told me 9 years ago that I would be here, I said this, I did a video on Instagram where I was like, if somebody would have told me 9 years ago that, oh, Bev, you 9 years, you're going to be thriving and doing podcasts. And I was, no, I just would not have believed it. And so during that time, since then, the whole timeline, I've heard so many different things from, oh, you'll get over it, or or um, oh, you went through that, I went through this, kind of like the whole comparison thing. So I thought it was really fitting for us to discuss it. Again, I just want to acknowledge, not only honor Jakai and for his heroism on that day, but I also want to acknowledge us, the living, who have to live without our loved ones. So that's why I thought that this was just so super important. And I know, Leslie, you've also experienced a great loss as well, of course. So if you want to share with us.
Well, I think that I've experienced a few different types of losses. And the most important thing, as far as where I'm at right now with grief, is to recognize that we all deserve to grieve and that the grieving process is really important to be able to move on. And I think, I suffered the loss of my father when I was only 18. And because our relationship was somewhat strained and I was just starting college, I had no emotional support as far as a therapist or like real professional resources at that time. It wasn't until I was 47, 48 that I recognized I never really grieved the loss of him. And so when we do that, there are consequences: physical, emotional. The body keeps score, which we'll talk about. We hold it in, it comes out in other ways. And because of recognizing that, there have been other times and other losses I've experienced where I've really sat with my grief. And it's not linear. It comes and goes and it comes back when you least expect it, which we'll also talk about. Sometimes it comes back and you don't know that's what's going on. But just for people to understand that there is a process that we really need to go through. It looks different for everyone, but we have to grieve. And if we don't, it will come out someday. So that's kind of the motivation I have for sharing what we want to share today.
Absolutely. And like Leslie said, there's many forms of grief. You can feel grief for the loss of a lot of different things. One of the major griefs for me was losing him. And when I lost him, when you lose someone in death, I think one of the things that is really hard is just it's so definite. it's just so permanent. It's just a permanent thing. It's almost like, okay, this mic is here, right? Now I'm going to take this mic and I'm just going to go throw it into the depths of the ocean, never to see this mic again. It's almost like, well, where did it go? Like,
Right.
and so I think, it was so fitting when you look at the five stages, which, by the way, guys, a good way to remember the five stages is to just say dabda. That's it right there. So one of the first things in the five stages is the denial, where you're just like, where is he? Like he's gonna come back. And one of the things that I recognized my first couple of years after losing him was I was still I knew he was gonna come home. Like this is not even happening. Like no, this is not a thing. He's working overtime. But where is he though? And
Mm.
I even remember it was about 2 years after, for whatever reason, I was just I don't even know where I was. I was out by myself somewhere. And I just remember I just it's like I was in the store like shopping or something. And I was just like, I haven't heard from him all like for a long time. Like what? And I almost had like this weird urge to give him a call. And it was like 2 years later. But it was just
Wow.
like I hadn't heard from him and it was just random, random. And so it comes in spurts, it comes unknowingly for those, of course, many of us have, some of us may not have as yet. But one thing
Mhm.
I do know that in life we will all experience is grief and trauma. So when you are experiencing that grief in death, that loss of death, it's so definite, it's so final, it's so confusing and one of the things that I also noticed in death on a personal level is that death can get real, real ugly. Uglier than just the ugly of losing someone is the nastiness that comes in the aftermath
Mm.
of people speaking on behalf of the deceased who can no longer fend for self. So there's just different things coming from different places, and you're trying to grieve. And always, when it comes to the death grief, you have to plan funerals and services and this and that, and it almost doesn't give you the opportunity to grieve. I know, Leslie, you mentioned you lost your dad at 18 and you didn't have the closest relationship, but you did at later on finally grieve him. And
Mhm.
for me, it took about, I want to say, mind you, this is year 9 we're coming up on. 5 years later is when I was finally able to grieve him
Yeah.
because I was so busy trying to fight systems, fight departments and families and friends, and then planning services and all these things that I just didn't have time to just even sit down and reflect on the fact that, wait a minute, you just lost, this
Yeah.
person indefinitely. Like they're
Yeah.
not coming back. You're not going to just bump into them at the local grocery store. They're gone, gone. And
Right.
it was that fifth year where I was sitting there, that fifth year, and I was just like sitting down. It was like this, what?
Now, would you say that that was when we talk about the stages? Because we have the five stages of grief. Denial, you kind of described that you were still in denial 2 years later when you thought about why isn't he called?
Yeah,
Right.
where is he?
Yeah. And then there's the anger stage, which you definitely experienced. I think I got stuck in anger
Mm.
probably with my dad. And I was just like, I'd rather be angry. I'm angry about the fact that I don't get to have an adult relationship with him. Then there's bargaining, depression, acceptance. So, would you say at year 5 you were in acceptance?
I think towards the end of that 5, I
Mm-hmm.
was in acceptance.
Okay.
It was this thing where I sat there, I was so sad. I think I was in Florida at the time, and I was so sad, and I was just like, he's gone. Like he's legit, like I'm not just in Florida and he's not just in Maryland.
Yeah.
He's not. He's just not nowhere, but in
Right.
in my heart and in my memories. And it
Right.
was this radical acceptance, right? Which is a term that we learned through DBT. I love DBT, y'all. You got to get into it. Phase through radical acceptance, which is where you just come to terms with that's what it is. And there's
Right.
no longer the questioning of why. Like
Right.
why him? Why me? Why isn't he here? Where is he? And you're all those other things are just like it's gone. You get it, and you just like, here we are. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And this is gonna be my life now. And I accept it. I accept that he's gone. I'm not gonna hear his voice. We're not gonna have kids. We're not gonna get married. We're not gonna see each other grow old. That's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's not, but it is. That's kind of where at the
That's where
fifth,
you have to get to.
and that's the thing too, Leslie. I'm glad you broke it down that way because people want to skip to the good part so fast. They want to
Right.
get to acceptance, like, how do you make this go away? I'm telling you
Right.
right now, that
Right.
journey, and I'm at 9, I'm at year 9, and I could still sit here and cry and boohoo about him if I want to, but I'm also at this place where I know how to address my emotions and I recognize my emotions and why I'm feeling them.
Right.
So for some people, it may take 10 years. For some people, it may take 2. It just really depends on you and your
Right.
personal journey.
And some people may skip the bargaining stage or the depression
Yeah.
stage and jump to something
Yeah.
else, or those things might come back. Like one day you just might be angry, like
Hmm. They
random.
flip-flop. They can
Yeah, it's
flip-flop.
not linear. It's
Huh.
very much, it has a mind of its own.
Hmm.
It can come from out of nowhere.
Yep.
And I think that it's important not just for people who are grieving or have grief to work through, but it's also really important for the people in their life to understand this because people want you to be better quickly.
Because they love you and they don't want to see you in this space.
Right. And they may see you one day and think that you're doing great and see you a month later and you're having a bad day and you're
Or
feeling,
or like me, they might see you 9 years later and be like, she's single. She's not married yet with any kids. Oh, she still misses him. No, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Like, it's this whole thing. Like, we we have to understand that our journeys are our own. And despite what it may appear on the outside to folks, unless you really come up to that person and have a discussion with them, it's better safe to not assume these things. I know it's happened for me where they're like, oh, she's listen, I'm choosing to be where I'm at because I'm
Mhm.
choosing to um I know that I want to wait for someone that is matching where I'm at right now. But that's a whole other story. It doesn't
Right.
mean that there ain't no DMs or no text messages or dates going on. It's just that if and when the time comes, that will come. So people do look at you and they're just like, oh man, Leslie's having a bad day. Is it because XYZ? Like we don't know that.
Right.
So
Right.
it's better to have a conversation with someone, and it's okay to do so. That goes back into being grief illiterate and not knowing how to approach someone and have those conversations. Have them.
Right. Right. Have them, but don't make assumptions. People are okay. And if
Yeah,
someone may be sad today because of something completely unrelated to
unrelated.
whatever it is, that they've recently gone through. So it's okay.
And I want to bring back up bargaining because like you said, would they flip-flop, right?
Yeah.
When
Tell me what bargaining looks like for people.
for me, well, for some people, it'll look like, what if I do this to get him or her back? Okay, but
Mhm.
what if I stop doing that and then maybe they can come back in?
Yeah.
So for me, my bargaining, and this is probably like, but this was my bargaining when they were working on him in the emergency room. One of my boys, and I don't know if he listens to my podcast, but we worked boy together. It was my first squad. Picks me up like this. He's like this big ass white boy. And he like picks me up like this and puts me outside of the hospital because I was I was losing my mind in the hospital. And Leslie, I remember going outside of the hospital and there's like this little patch of grass at PGH in the hospital. And I got on my hands and knees. And I'm not I've never really been a big religious person. I'm very spiritual now, but then I wasn't any of it. I remember getting on my hands and knees and I started praying. Like I legit started praying to God and I was like, God, take me, not him. He's the better
Mhm.
human. Like I was legit bargaining with God to like, yo, if you could bring him back, but and take me. If there's a soul that needs to be taken today, let it be mine. But don't take his. Like, can you
Right.
work with me here? Like, I'd
Right.
rather be gone as long as you keep him alive. I'd rather my family and friends mourn the loss of me than anybody on this earth, and I get to see the light and shine of him.
Right.
That's where I was. And I was on my hands and knees and I was praying and I was crying. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Right. Right.
So, bargaining can look like so many different things. And for me,
Right.
that was my bargaining. Like, I'll give you me for him.
Right.
And it was like this intense thing, but like it could look like anything to anybody, because when you're in that denial space and you're confused because you're like they're gonna come back, you're like, okay, he'll come back. Oh, you know what? Because he always wanted me to do XYZ thing. What if I do that and then maybe he'll come back? You're trying
Right.
to kind of like really make it so that there's a reason for them to come back if you do
Yes.
something in exchange.
Yeah. And sometimes it can look like if I had done something differently, they wouldn't be gone. And so it's bargaining, but it's also taking on blame for something that was completely out of your hands. But people can get stuck there for a very long time. What if I would have saw
Oh,
the signs in family members who take their own life? Like what if I had seen the signs? What if I had made the phone call? What if I had said something to them differently? And that is a normal part of the process, but it's really important for people to understand it's part of the process so they can move through that part, especially if they are choosing to bargain in a way that's blaming themselves and taking on responsibility for something that was really out of their control.
yeah, some people could even get to this like magical thinking where they're just like, oh, if I would have never did this, they would still be alive. It's like you're
Mm-hmm.
not, I'm sorry, y'all, but we are not that powerful.
Yeah.
We are not that powerful when things unfortunate like that happen. They happen. And we can also, like you mentioned, we could get stuck there. And when you
Yes.
get stuck there in the would have, could have, should have's, and you can't remove from there, you might still go through, the anger and you might go through the depression. And then you're at an acceptance and you're like, hey, man, my friend passed away. I accept it. It is what it is. And then you're like, you know what? But they still would have been here if I would have just blank, blank, blank. It's like you're still
Right.
stuck in that bargaining. So
Right.
it's acknowledging, it's recognizing that number one, we don't have that power to
Mm-hmm.
take a life in such a way. And obviously we can. Some people we know we're talking about like if you want to hurt someone like that. But if we're talking about someone who got sick or died by suicide, or in my situation was shot, and that was out of my control. I used to say, because, he was actually heading to me when he got shot. He was heading to my direction to drop off food for me. So back then, I was like, if I would have never asked him to come drop off that food, he would have been way down south, you know,
Right.
because
Right.
he had an assignment. He would have never even he would have drove, he wouldn't even known that was going on
Right.
because he didn't have a radio in his car. So he would have just drove right past all of that. By the time he got all the way down south, he probably would have found out through everybody else, like, yo, there's an active shooter situation going on. You check on
Right.
Perez, like, is she okay? And then he would have found out and got there afterwards.
Right.
And it's so many things. But in my mind, Leslie, I was bargaining. I was like, if I wouldn't have told him to bring that food, he wouldn't
Yeah.
have been there. If I would have just went and picked up the food myself, if I would have woke up earlier, if this and this and that, and you're just going back like to this,
Right.
if I wouldn't have picked up this special assignment in this area, if we would have just both called off, if I would have.
Right. But so I think it's important for people to recognize that that is one of the stages and that it's normal
Yes.
to go through that stage and for people who are supporting someone, it's okay for someone to have those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not very healthy to stay there.
No.
I was in an accident with my friend and she suffered a traumatic brain injury. And the what if I had are a mile long, right?
Yeah.
And her husband feels the same way. Like we both wish something else would have happened. And that situation never unfolded, but it did. So I needed to go through the what ifs. Now, we're going to talk about what not to say
Oof.
in a situation like that or any situation with grief. Oftentimes, people give you your what ifs. And if
Yep,
you haven't gotten to the bargaining phase,
you will.
they want to give it to you.
Hand it right to you. Here you go. What
Yeah. So
if,
I think,
Leslie, what if?
and they'll, well, why was she driving? And
Yeah.
why didn't you just take the key? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's not that easy.
it
And,
is not.
but so that's a good thing, I think, for people listening to understand that when people are grieving, they are going to go through a bargaining phase where they're going to throw out all those what ifs on their own
And self-blame.
and self blame. And that is part of the process. And all we can do is comfort them and remind them that it wasn't their fault and allow them to move through that. But we don't need to add to it.
No, no,
Uh, and we don't need to suggest
no.
those things. So I think a lot of people seek out professional help when they get to the depression phase.
Yes,
I think that that is when other people start to really worry about the person. And again, like it's a part of the process that many people need to move through. It's only really concerning when people stay there too long, right?
correct. That's when it becomes, that's when it becomes dangerous, not
Mm-hmm.
just for your mental, but your physical. And you'll see it, you'll notice it, you're gonna feel it. And it's really a difficult space because I call it a switch because people always ask me, Bev, how did you like, Bev, I can't even imagine living life after that. How did you get out of your
Mm-hmm.
depression, or how are you doing what you're doing? How are you able to talk about it and still be good? And I honestly, if I could give that switch moment gift to people and just like put it in their bodies, I would.
Yeah.
However, I can't. I don't know any other way to explain it than to explain it as a switch. And it's almost like you're at this bottom nasty place because Leslie, you know, I had a suicide attempt. And I think of a couple folks know. And when I was in that dark space where now you're living with survivor's guilt, the self-blame, the anger, the denial. You went through that. It's still there. It's just piled up. You haven't gotten rid of it yet. You haven't accepted it yet. You're carrying it, all of it. And you're in the depression with all this stuff. Just throw the bags of all of it on my back and let me just go deeper in the hole as this just weighs me down. And
Right.
you're just down at this really bottom, nasty, lonely place. It's a nasty place, and I don't wish it for anyone. It's a disgusting place to be. And it is the filthiest place that I can ever imagine being. And you are talking the worst things to yourself, and finally, out of nowhere, you decide to either cry it out or you just get like this, like, man, like, fuck this. Like, I can't be like this anymore. And it's that switch.
Right.
And I don't know who to give it up to. I don't know if I give it up to spirits. I don't know to give it up to my angels, to Jakai, to God, to my friends, to my family, to my support system, to the therapy that I've taken, or to give it up to D, all the above, with a little bit of Bev courage, where you're just like, yeah, man, I can't be this. Like, I'm not meant to be this. I'm meant to be something, you know? But
Right.
it's a switch and it just happens within you and it wakes you up and it just really gets you like, okay, you wipe your tears and you're like, okay, now what do I do?
Right.
And from there, you are walking out of that depression and a little bit just closer to that acceptance.
Right.
But man, is that a rough tunnel. It's dark. You can't see nothing, and you just blindly just hearing noises and ruckus, and you're weighted with this bag of shit, and you don't know, you can't tell up from down.
would you say that's just something that you have to go through though? Like you can't go around it. You have to go
No,
through that.
you have to go through it,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be nasty.
And
Like I
but
always
it
tell
might be
people,
shorter for some people, and
sure,
it's okay. We talked about this before we started that not everyone grieves for long periods of time.
no,
And some people are okay very quickly,
yeah,
and that's okay too. That's if that is your process, great. Um, we so often want to shame ourselves for everything, and some people almost feel guilty for not having a long grieving period and not going through each of
that's
these
okay.
phases, and they may not, or it may be very brief. That's
Because
okay.
as you mentioned, it looks different for everybody. It's not linear. This was my experience, and
Mhm.
it's going to be different for everybody. However, what I do know is that when you're in that depression phase, another thing that you're unfortunately in this tug of war with is I don't want to feel these feelings. Like I don't want to feel depressed. So what do we do when we don't
Right.
want to feel?
We numb.
We numb. We go to the quick and dirties.
Right.
And that's also a dangerous place where we can stay. Or might get out of the depression, like, all right, man, I'm good. I'm in the gym. I'm doing my thing. But you've utilized the quick and dirties so much as a medicine or a thing to numb feelings that now when you're angry, you're numbing. When
Right.
you're sad, you're numbing. When you're numbing now to the point where that can lead to a whole other host of things. So it's just important to be mindful when you're in that depression, you're have some grace with yourself. You're probably going to do things that are not in your own best light, that you know are not defiant of the man or woman or human that you are,
Yeah.
but you're really trying to not feel the depression anymore. Like, I
Right.
don't want get this off of me. And
Right.
what I've noticed is the best way for me to get depression off of me was to go through it sober.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
felt my feelings and I had to feel them sober.
Right. Right. You can't
I,
numb.
no, I did not. I couldn't. I was like, I'm sad. You didn't want to just not feel sad. Of course, I want to not feel sad, whether it's sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever it was. I did not want to feel it, but I felt it, and I felt it alone, and I felt it sober, and then I felt it with professional help.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
thing with anger. Same thing with this whole confusion. Same thing with the self-blaming. You go through it. I'm telling you guys, I know it's gonna be hard, and there's gonna be moments when you're like, nah, Bev, I need a drink. Like this was too much or whatever. I get it. But if you haven't done anything to professionally get those issues addressed or that grief of the death of loss of a loved one, I highly suggest you do it sober, whether with a professional or with somebody you really trust in, a friend, and just to even have a phone conversation like, man, this, you know what, dude, like, I gotta tell you, this is fucking me up.
Right. Right. Very important. Very important because you just have to go through it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then that's also like another thing, like culturally, it's different.
Mm.
Grief looks different in men and women and in Hispanic families or African American families, Caucasian, whatever, or even just
Right.
in your groups, in your professions. Grief looks different for how police officers grieve versus how nurses grieve. There are doctors that are seeing people in the ERs or whatever, dying or whatever.
Right.
So culturally, there's also stigmas and everything attached to what grieving needs to look like. And I think that that's also something that's making it difficult for people to follow through those motions, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's changing. I think COVID changed the way people grieve and the way people die and the processes we have for that we used to go through. There's just it's streamlined. It's a lot faster. A lot fewer big gatherings, which is if someone hasn't experienced a loss since 2020, they may feel like there's a missing piece now because it's different. It may not be different everywhere, but it's different a lot of places. And so I think social support systems are reduced for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
do a lot more things remotely. So we're with people less. That may be changing now, but I think that has that has made it
Play a role.
difficult. And for people who suffered a loss during COVID, I think because of the isolation at the time, those losses may need revisited. Like me, they people may not have had the opportunity to really grieve. And so that's a whole nother subject to go and road to go down. But I think it's an important one to acknowledge that there could be people out there who had multiple losses and they
Yeah.
never, because life was so crazy, there was so
It's
much
so
going
crazy
on.
going on.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk about other types of grief or other events that cause grief. Are you ready to move into that
Ooh,
topic?
let's go.
All right. So we're
You know we have those.
we, you know, we don't always realize that we're grieving something. And we don't always recognize that we need to grieve something. And sometimes it can shock us, or we could be going through something and not understand what's happening. Things like just moving can trigger a lot of grief.
Mhm.
And um, there can be societal grief, which I think people are going through now because we have a lot of change happening in the world. And that's okay. And it's something we have to move through. And I definitely see people moving through denial, anger, bargaining, depression. I don't know if we're at acceptance yet, but that's happening in society right now.
Yeah.
Job loss and divorce are big ones that I think we wanted to really hit on. And you experienced job loss after Jakai's death. I also experienced job loss that was that triggered a lot of grief. And again, it took me about 10 years to realize that I needed to grieve it. I just bypassed it and moved on, but I didn't. So, do you want to talk about that experience for you?
Dude. And it's crazy because like unless you are, well, let me put it like this, unless you're in law enforcement, like you really there's different, like I said, there's just different professions, right? So there's different things I'm not gonna know about because I have not lived or experienced that profession or how that community interacts. But law enforcement, the way that I got in there, first off, I got in there at 22 years old. So you got to think like it's a little 22-year-old brain going into this community of police officers that are embracing you, calling you all kind of, sister, you're my sister, we're family. You're in the group chat, you're invited to all the cookouts, all the weddings, all the baby showers, all the birthdays. I mean, that is your legit family. Mind you, there might be some that you don't get along with, that you don't like. Um, the systemic racism and all the other things, that's a whole other topic. But there was this camaraderie. When I started, there was this camaraderie and it was so tight and we were so bonded. They gave me a nickname. I had a nickname. I was called, from my first squad, they would call me Taz, like the Tasmanian devil.
Mm-hmm.
Or they would call me like the canine, and they would literally, my boy would grab me from like my vest and my gun belt, and he would pick me up and throw me in a car, and I would just look for the drugs. And it was like this, that was just like a little reckless little thing. But it was just this camaraderie, this way that we used to joke, this way that we used to be, these kind of morbid jokes that we used to make that would be completely inappropriate now, but they were so funny. That's how we used to get on and how we used to deal with the stuff that we had to see. And it was just so close and so tight, and it went from that to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like how like you have like a sliding scale of like stuff. Like it just, someone like a warm transfer into nothing. No. It was
Yeah,
Jakai Jakai died that day. Nothing. No one.
right.
And it was a sprinkle of people here and there, but more than anything, it was everybody turned their back. Everybody turned their back. And, for their own reasons, for whatever was going on, for all the rumors and things that to this day, I still don't know. And I'm okay with it now. But back then, girl, we talked about the South blame.
Yeah.
So I'm already living with shame and self-blame and guilt for his loss of life because I think I had a first hand in that. And then everybody was like not talking to me or doesn't want to be around me or say anything to me. I'm like, yep, you're right, guys. I suck. I'm a big piece of crap. Like you're right.
Mm.
Nobody I did this. I don't deserve anything. I'm a worthless junk person. Like I'm shit. And it was we're talking about bottom, like bottom of the bottom bad. And so when we talk about a loss of a profession, I will admit that for me, I did not create that important boundary of having friends outside of the profession.
Mm.
I made the profession my identity. Like I was that was me. Like those
Okay.
were my people. This is what I do. This is who I am. It's one of those things where you go to a restaurant and you see a guy in like cargo pants and the t-shirt with like a flag right here and some Oakleys, and you just know he's a fucking cop. But he's like at Olive Garden with his family. Like that's who I was in female Latina version. Like you just knew I was a cop. Like I wore
Right.
it. Like
Right. It
I
was part of your identity.
it was me, dude. It was me 100%. And I was proud of it. I may not have liked it for a while. I was bitter, I was angry, whatever, all the things, but that was what I did and that was who I was. And I was willing to commit to 20 years of it. And after that incident, it was just like so swift. The switch of, no, you can't sit here. You can't sit with us. Like it was
Right.
just so abrupt. That loss of identity, like I didn't know. I wanted to go back, after the incident, I was ready to go back to work. Like
Yeah.
I really was. However, I couldn't convince any of the psychologists and therapists and doctors that I was okay. I couldn't convince them. It was just too obvious that I was not to them. All the
Okay.
typical things of PTSD. So they wouldn't give me my job back, but I was like, but who will I be? Like what will I
Right.
do? I'm
Right.
like, maybe I'll still, I'll talk to my friends and find out, but what friends?
Right.
You're not one of
Right.
us anymore. So it's like, we're not gonna talk to you. Like, it was just weird. Fast forward to where I'm at now, obviously it's important for me to recognize that I had gave too much of my identity to that place. And I also recognized that I was not very approachable. So
Mm.
it wasn't that people turned their backs on me. It's just that people didn't know how to approach me, especially after that situation.
Right. But you were going through
Grief, anger,
the loss of your love
love it.
and your identity in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
So that was
And they didn't know people,
so
again,
much.
people didn't know how to navigate that.
Right.
And I
People
was
don't know what
already
to
kind
say.
of, yeah, and I was already not like really an approachable girl. I can take ownership in knowing that I was kind of, I was not the nicest gal, back then. So I can understand that people didn't just want to be in my space or approach me or invite me to things. Um, now since the years passed and also too I did leave, the States for some time and I didn't make myself available. However, now that I'm back and I have came back a couple years before, I have been invited to events, I have been invited to things and I've met up with my old squad mates and they're like, Bev, we've always been here.
Yeah.
We've always been here. You left, you left, you got a burner phone and we didn't know how to even get to you,
Right.
so, but the whole thing now is I had to come to terms that when I left Maryland, it was about, I want to say a year, I left Maryland to go to Florida and I couldn't find work. And the only thing, like nobody would hire me because the only experience I had was law enforcement and I did patrol. I didn't do really specialty units to work any specialty like jobs. So, I mean, I went to Olive Garden and they were like, I keep saying Olive Garden, maybe I want some of that. Olive Garden, Olive Garden was like, we can't give you a job. You have no restaurant experience. I'm like, how the fuck am I gonna get the experience if you don't let me get the experience, bro? Like, try me. She's like, no,
Right.
and it was really hard for me to get work. I
So there
ended
was
up,
added financial stress.
oh yeah, pile that on. Like I can't, my identity is I know I'm a police officer. I know how to do police officer things. Maybe not that great, but that's what I knew how to do. And I
Yeah.
could no longer be that. I could no longer bear arms. I had to say bye to my weapons and I named them. I had to give those to whatever, sell those off. Just I was no longer officer, press 3122. Like that's my ID. Like that's no longer who I was. You go from being this person that is in a barricade situation, telling your guys and girls where to post up and making sure the scene is safe and doing these really like big things and big situations that are dangerous to society and really trying to protect your community to I finally got hired at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Coral Springs, Florida, to asking a group of teenagers if they want ranch or blue cheese.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And then they would just, tell you to fuck off and leave you no tip because they're kids, they were there for the BOGO, for the buy one, get one. Like they didn't fucking
Right.
want to pay me
Right.
anything. Yeah.
So you find yourself saying, what am I doing here?
Who am I?
How did I get here?
How did I get here? I
Right.
was running a squad of over 11 men and women in uniform in Prince George's County in one of the toughest areas. And now I'm wearing a Buffalo Wild Wings jersey. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I love Buffalo Wild Wings and thank y'all for giving me that job. But I went from that to that, and
Okay.
it's
So let's talk
very,
about
yeah.
that moment when you find yourself saying, how did I get here?
Hmm.
And where you go from there. Like if someone is listening and they're hearing your story and thinking, wow, I'm going through this and that's where I'm at, I'm saying to myself, how did I get here? After a loss, a job loss, the loss of a loved one, whatever it was, they've lost their way because of the grieving process or not going through the grieving process. What turned it around for you? Like, at what point did you say, I don't know how I got here, but I know I'm where I'm going next?
That's a really, really, really good question. And it was this very weird, again, switch moment. It was just this pivotal switch moment. When I don't know how familiar you are working in the restaurant biz, but in the restaurant business, it's a whole other community and culture style as well. And so we were partying after closing up. We're doing our things, but I had to realize all these people that I'm hanging out, they're younger than me. They're working at Buffalo Wild Wings. They're great, great people. But I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, what am I actually doing? What am I actually supposed to be doing? I didn't
Yeah.
have anything planned forward. I didn't have another job lined up. I just knew that this wasn't, it wasn't contributing to Bev being better in her overall well-being.
Yeah.
Like that depression before you get to acceptance, yeah, this was not taking me away from depression.
Yeah.
I would go home counting my tips, cash money from a day of, working at the restaurant, and I would just be like, so this is it. So this is what I'm supposed to be doing after everything else that I did. This is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it was like this conversation with myself, but it was very authentic, very real, very vulnerable, very raw, again, sober. And I was just like, no, I don't think this is it. And out of nowhere, nothing, with nothing planned ahead, with no knowledge of how I'm going to pay whatever rent, bills, nothing. I went in there and I told them I'm putting in my 2 weeks. And they were like, Bev, well, what's the problem? Like, what's going on? I was like, really, I need to move on. But I really, really thank you. I'm so grateful that you gave me this opportunity. It had to happen. Had
Yeah.
that opportunity never had happened, I would have never felt like, wait, there's got to be something more.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was almost like, here, Bev, eat this humble pie.
Yeah.
Because I went from being police officer, having my own townhouse, having a car, having my beloved, we were gonna get married and this whole thing to nothing in Florida working at this restaurant, this
Right.
food chain restaurant.
Right. So then what happened next after you kind of flip that flip?
Ooh, okay, so thank you guys for listening. That brings part one of this episode to a close. Stay tuned. Part two is going to be coming out next week on Wednesday on What the Are You Talking About, Bev Wednesdays. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you guys in the next one.